This footage was never meant to be found. The screen glitches violently. Green-tinted static flickers across a dark forest lit only by night vision. A single breath trembles through the audio, shaky, panicked. Then a whisper, close to the mic, almost too quiet to hear. "We shouldn't have come here." The camera jerks, stumbling through the woods, catching brief flashes of terrified faces. One boy's eyes are wide, his lips trembling as he presses a finger to them, signaling silence. Behind him, something moves just at the edge of the infrared glow. A shadow dragging something heavy. Metal clinks echo through the night. Chains. A girl sobs quietly into the lens. Her voice is low and broken. It wasn't a game. It wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. Cut to static again. Then a frame locks in. Someone's running, breathing hard, the camera bouncing wildly with each footstep. A whisper begins, layered and unnatural, like it's being spoken by a dozen mouths at once. One must always remain. Suddenly everything goes silent. No wind, no footsteps, just the ticking sound of the camera recording. It scans across the empty forest floor until it lands on a pair of boots. Motionless, facing the lens, the camera pans up slowly, screams, chaotic. Quick cuts, faces lit only by flashlight, mouths wide in horror, a blur of trees spinning in all directions. Then it cuts again. This time, it's a close-up of someone's eye, bloodshot, blinking in rapid panic, a voice his own shaking as he speaks. "If anyone finds this, don't try to find us. Don't come to Camp Wraith. He's not a ghost. He's not a legend. He's still here." A low rattle of chains begins again. Then, nothing. Silence. The camera shakes one last time before falling sideways into the dirt. Final frame. This video was uploaded automatically. The users have not been online since. Then, darkness. And somewhere, just beneath the silence, the sound of chains getting closer. They weren't ghost hunters. Not really. Just 5 adrenaline-chasing YouTubers chasing clicks, chasing fame. Their channel, Night Raiders, had built a following off abandoned malls and empty asylums. Creepy, yes, but safe, controlled, edited to thrill. But this time was different. They called it their biggest overnight challenge yet. 24 hours inside the decaying remains of a military prison camp buried deep in the woods of an unnamed county. Its history wiped from official records, erased by time and silence. The place had no map coordinates, no signage, just a name passed around in whispers, Camp Wraith. The locals refused to speak of it. When asked, they changed the subject. When pressed, they only muttered warnings. No one stays past sundown. It wasn't shut down, it was sealed. You don't hear them until they've already heard you. The group, of course, recorded every warning with grinning faces and dramatic gasps for the camera. Their followers would eat it up. The plan was simple. Arrive before dusk, set up a base camp near the old prison gates, film walkthroughs of the interior during the night, and live stream at midnight for maximum views. They brought drones, night vision gear, motion detectors, everything to make the experience feel real, raw, and terrifying. But they didn't bring respect. They didn't bring caution. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, is that Camp Wraith was never officially decommissioned. The final log entry from its last warden read only 3 words: "Do not open." Inside, time had twisted. Memories bled through walls, and someone had been left behind. As they crossed the rusted threshold of the outer gate, the sun dipped low, and shadows lengthened unnaturally. The air grew colder, heavier, like the forest itself was holding its breath. One of them joked, "Welcome to the land of lost souls," not realizing how close he was to the truth. From that moment on, the forest never let them go. The trees closed in, the paths they came in on disappeared, and somewhere beneath the soil, chains stirred. Camp Wraith was awake again, and it wanted more than footage. It wanted one more prisoner. They stopped for gas at a rundown station 20 miles from the edge of the forest. It was the only sign of life for hours in either direction. Rusty signs creaking in the breeze, a broken vending machine humming like it was possessed, and an old radio behind the counter crackling static between war-era tunes. The perfect pit stop for ambience. Their cameras were already rolling. As they filled up the van, joking and narrating for the vlog, a frail voice cut through the noise like a knife through fabric. "Don't wake the one in chains." It came from an old man sitting on a splintered bench outside the station, his skin like parchment, eyes clouded but staring directly into the lens of their camera. His voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. There was something about the way he said it, measured, as if he had rehearsed it 1,000 times in silence. They paused. One of them chuckled nervously, thinking it was a setup. Maybe the guy was in on the legend. Another leaned into the bit, holding the mic closer. "Excuse me, sir? What chains? Who's in them?" But the old man didn't elaborate. He just looked away, muttering now, over and over like a prayer gone rotten. "Don't wake him! Don't wake him! Don't wake him!" Inside the station, the clerk pretended not to hear. But when they asked about the man outside, his hands shook slightly while bagging their snacks. "He comes here once a month," the clerk whispered. "Same day, same words. Been doing it for over 50 years. Used to be a guard out at that camp long before they shut it down." They pressed him for more, but he wouldn't say. Just nodded once toward the trees beyond the highway. "If you're going up there, don't go past the second fence. That's where the real prison starts." Of course, the crew ate it up. "He's a plant," one laughed. "Perfect content." They got back in the van, spirits high, joking about haunted chains and ghostly prisoners. None of them noticed the old man standing now, staring after them with a look not of fear, but of mourning, as if he had just watched 5 coffins drive into the woods. He didn't wave. He didn't speak again. He simply turned his back and sat down, waiting for next month, waiting for the next ones. They arrived at Camp Wraith just before dusk, bouncing along a narrow dirt path that hadn't seen tires or footsteps in decades. The forest around them felt unusually still, as if the trees were holding their breath, leaning in to listen. No birds, no insects, just the crunch of leaves beneath tires and the low hum of their nervous laughter. The front gate, a towering skeleton of rusted iron, hung crooked on one hinge, draped in vines like it was being slowly swallowed by the earth itself. One of them joked, "Welcome to Alcatraz in hell," but none of them laughed for long. The prison loomed beyond the gate like a broken monument. Chunks of wall had caved in. Towers leaned at odd angles. Nature had reclaimed most of it, yet something about the place still pulsed with structure, with intention, as if the ruin was pretending to be dead. They stepped through the threshold and immediately felt it. The temperature dropped at least 10 degrees. No wind, just a deep, bone-deep chill that settled in their lungs and didn't leave. Their breath fogged the air, even though it was early autumn. Cameras rolling, they wandered through the outer yard. The ground was cracked with weeds, but beneath the growth, faint outlines of boot prints remained. Some staggered, some dragging. The buildings themselves seemed to groan as they passed, like they resented being disturbed. One of the YouTubers peeled ivy from a wall and stumbled back. There were carvings everywhere. Tally marks scratched into stone, dozens, sometimes hundreds in uneven rows, like someone had been counting the days or the lives. Beneath the tallies were words, prayers, desperate and half erased. "Forgive me. He watches in the dark. Chains can't hold him." And then, a phrase repeated again and again, sometimes scrawled in jagged script, other times etched with such force the stone had cracked. "I am prisoner 37. It was on every wall, every corner, as if someone or something was trying to remind the world that he existed, that he had never left. One of the crew whispered, "It's like he wrote it hundreds of times." Another corrected him, staring at a freshly scratched line, the edges still flaking stone dust. "No, he's still writing." And somewhere deep within the ruins, something shifted, something listening. By 10:13 p.m., the forest had devoured the last trace of light. The trees, dense and skeletal, stretched like blackened bones into a sky without stars. The group huddled close around the campfire, its flickering flames barely holding back the suffocating darkness pressing in from all sides. Cameras were still rolling. This was the moment they had come for. The night, the fear, the thrill. They laughed louder than they needed to. Voices brittle from adrenaline, mocking shadows and daring something, anything to show itself. One of them tossed a flashlight into the air, catching it dramatically, saying, "If there's a ghost out here, now's the time, bro." The others whooped and clapped, but beneath the surface, each of them felt it, that off sensation, like they weren't truly alone. The wind picked up, or so they thought. Dry leaves danced across the ground in sudden spirals. The fire flickered harder, drawing inward, as if shrinking. The trees groaned in the distance, a low, drawn-out creak that didn't sound quite natural. And for a few seconds, the conversation died down. Just silence. Then, a sound, soft, almost human, a whisper, quick, fragile, but unmistakable. One must always remain. No one reacted, because no one heard it. Not then. Later, when they reviewed the footage, they found it. It came just after the joke, just before the wind, captured on 2 separate mics. No one's mouth moved when the words were spoken. The voice didn't belong to any of them. It was raspy, broken, like someone speaking through a throat unused for decades. The audio engineer even enhanced the file, played it back slow, layered. There was something beneath the whisper, a second voice saying the same words, but deeper, inhuman, almost mechanical. One must always remain. The phrase repeated 3 times, but only the first was audible in real time. Back at the fire, one of the girls had shivered, clutching her jacket, saying, "I swear it just got colder." The flames had lowered again, unprompted. And in the background of the shot, behind the dancing shadows of the crew, a thin silhouette stood motionless between the trees, watching, waiting, unnoticed, just remaining. Josh was always the skeptic, the loud one, the guy who laughed the hardest when things got creepy, who loved to say it's just wind, or that's probably just an animal whenever something unexplainable happened. He had spent the entire day mocking the prison carvings, filming over the tally marks and whispering dramatically, "I am prisoner number 37. Ooh, spooky!" The others laughed with him, but even then, something about his jokes felt forced, like he was trying to drown out the unease gnawing at the back of his mind. It was just after midnight when he got up from the fire and said, "I'm going to take a leak. Don't follow me with the camera this time. Creeps." They waved him off, chuckled, and kept chatting as his flashlight beam bobbed away through the trees. That was the last time they saw him. 2 minutes passed, then 5, then 10. Someone called out, jokingly at first, "Josh, you fall into a pit or what?" No answer. They shouted again, louder. Still nothing. A quick vote was taken. They'd give him another 5 minutes, then go look. Maybe he was trying to scare them, build suspense for the video. Classic Josh. Then came the scream. It tore through the woods like a blade through silence, sharp, high, and full of panic. Not the kind of scream you fake, not the kind of scream you recover from. It was cut off halfway through, swallowed by the trees. And then, silence. They ran in the direction it came from, flashlight shaking, breath ragged, camera still rolling. They found his flashlight first, then his beanie, lying in the dirt like it had been dropped mid-step. And then, his camera. It was tilted on its side, lens cracked, still recording, pointed directly at a rusted metal door set into a stone wall they hadn't explored yet. A cell door, half sunken in the ground, overgrown by roots. It was wide open, its hinges groaned softly as the wind, or something else gently pushed it back and forth. One of them stepped closer, light trembling as it traced the doorframe. That same phrase had been carved into the iron, over and over again. "I am prisoner 37." And just beneath it, scratched fresh and deep, he laughed. They called for Josh until sunrise, but Camp Wraith doesn't return what it takes. It was just past midnight when the forest came alive, not with animals or insects, but with the unmistakable sound of something unnatural. The fire had long since burned to embers. The group, now 4, lay in their tents, sleep uneasy and shallow after Josh's disappearance. No one admitted it, but none of them really believed he was pulling a prank anymore. The laughter had died. The woods felt different now, watchful, pressing in. Then came the first sound, faint at first. A low metallic scrape like something being dragged across stone. Then a pause. Then again, closer, heavier. Shh, shh. One by one, they stirred, eyes opening to pitch black. No birds, no wind, only the slow, deliberate sound of metal against earth. A chain. It wasn't coming from one direction. It was coming from every direction. From inside his tent, Evan sat up, heart pounding. He whispered into the darkness, "Did you hear that?" A trembling voice replied from the next tent, "It's circling us." They unzipped the tents with trembling hands, flashlights flickering to life. Beams cut through the black, slicing the trees into fractured shadows, but nothing moved. Then came a sound that made their blood run cold, a heavy clink, as if something metal had struck a tree, followed by another and another. The dragging returned, closer, louder. The sound of rusted chains slithering through underbrush, wrapping around trunks, pulling. The ground itself seemed to vibrate beneath them. Evan raised his camera, now breathing fast, whispering into the lens. "Something's out there. It's not an animal. It's big. It's walking. It's dragging something." Behind them, the trees parted slightly, just for a second. A tall silhouette stood still between the trunks, too tall, too thin, arms hanging at unnatural angles. Something hung from its shoulders, chains, rusted, thick, fused into its skin like a part of it. As the flashlight caught its edge, it vanished again, slipping back into the black like it had never been there. They didn't scream, they didn't run. Not yet, because deep inside, each of them knew the truth. Whatever was dragging those chains wasn't looking for them. It was counting them, and one must always remain. They found the journal buried beneath a pile of rotted wood and shattered glass in what remained of the warden's quarters. The room reeked of mildew and dust, the air thick with decay. But the book, leather-bound, brittle, stained, was untouched by time, as if it had been waiting. The cover bore no title, just a small brand in the center, a circle of chains surrounding the number 37. They opened it with trembling hands, flipping past pages of neat script that soon devolved into erratic scrawls. The entries began mundanely, logistics, discipline reports, supply shortages. But a few pages in, the tone shifted, darker, obsessive. Subject number 37 has survived another week without food, no water, no rest, yet no decay. His blood is cold, his eyes do not blink, he stares, always stares. I no longer believe he is human. The deeper they read, the more the horror unfolded. Prisoner number 37 wasn't a criminal in the traditional sense. He had been brought here during the final years of a war no one remembered, classified as a living weapon experiment. For 37 years, he had been locked in a solitary cell deep underground, far from the others. No name, no records, only numbers. They tried everything: starvation, sleep deprivation, exposure, isolation, and still he lived. The guards began calling him the thing in the chains. Eventually, the staff began to crack. Guards quit, some went mad. One entry described a warden who gouged out his own eyes after claiming to see the prisoner's face in every reflection. The remaining officers sealed the door with 7 layers of chained iron, then buried the entrance beneath concrete and prayer. But the final entry chilled them most. He doesn't age. He doesn't eat. He whispers only one sentence, over and over again. One must always remain. We believe, if all who witness him die, he is free. So we stay, we remain, to hold him in place. God forgive us, one of them whispered. He was never buried, just locked. Outside, a chain clinked faintly in the dark, followed by a low, unnatural groan of metal. Then silence, heavy, waiting, as if something had just learned it had been found. He was the face of the channel, the fearless one, the voice that steadied the group when the forest began to whisper. While the others started to crack, he kept the energy alive with a confident grin and a camera-ready tone. Even after Josh vanished, even after the dragging chains, he kept telling their growing live stream audience that everything was fine, just good content, just suspense. "We're not scared," he said. "We're pros." Earlier, he'd laughed at the legend, mocked the journal, called the prisoner story a scripted hoax, a setup left behind by someone who wanted to scare thrill seekers. He even joked about being the last man standing. "One must always remain," he said to the camera. "Fine, let it be me." But now something had changed. He started hearing his name. It began as a breeze through the trees, soft like leaves brushing against each other, but it carried syllables. His name, Matt, drawn out, slow, like it was being spoken by something that had never used a human tongue before. First once, then again, louder. "Matt!" He spun in circles, flashlight darting through the forest. Nothing. He tried to laugh it off, but the edges of his smile were fraying. "Matt!" The others heard nothing. He decided to go live, pull the audience in. He framed the shot himself, centered his face in the glow of the fire, and whispered into the mic. "Something's out there. You guys hear that? If I disappear like Josh, tell people. Tell them it's real." He forced a grin. Or hey, maybe I'm just losing it, right? Behind him, the shadows thickened. The live chat exploded. Messages blurred across the screen. "Behind you! Turn around! What is that?" He froze. The camera shook in his hands. His breathing grew ragged. His voice cracked. "He's behind me." But the camera tilted as he turned slowly, the image catching only brief, fragmented glimpses. Elongated limbs, chains coiled like vines, a head that shimmered with the illusion of a face, but had none. Then the stream went black. No scream, no struggle. Just a final quiet sentence before the static swallowed the feed. "He has no face." And in the silence that followed, the sound of chains dragging something heavy back into the trees. Panic set in fast. With two gone and the whispers closing in, the three remaining YouTubers made the call to run. Leave the gear, leave the camp, leave everything. The idea was simple. Follow the same dirt path they used to enter the forest just hours ago. Get back to the van and drive until the signal bars returned. Until the world felt real again. But from the first step past the prison gate, they knew something was wrong. The trail wasn't there. Where once there had been a narrow, winding footpath lined with broken stones and fading markers, now there was only thicket. Dense trees had shifted, closer, tighter, the underbrush clawing at their ankles like fingers. They pushed forward anyway, using GPS to guide them. But the compass spun uselessly, and the blinking blue dot on the map seemed to orbit a single point without progress. That's when they saw the tree. A towering, twisted oak with a thick rope dangling from a branch, frayed but intact. A noose. Beneath it, a rotted wooden chair toppled long ago. The sight chilled them, but they kept moving. 20 minutes later, they saw it again. Same tree, same rope, same chair. "That's impossible," one of them whispered. They turned off the GPS and tried again, using only instinct, sunlight, the slope of the land, anything. They walked for another 10 minutes, not speaking, just moving. The same tree. This time, the rope swayed gently, as if something had just leapt or been pulled from it. They screamed. One broke into a sprint, the others chasing after him. Trees whipped past, branches slicing at their faces. They didn't stop until they collapsed in a small clearing, breathing hard, crying. Then they looked up. The tree. Again, the noose now hung lower. One of them raised the camera, hands shaking, and spoke into the lens. "We're stuck. It's like the forest is folding around us. We're not walking in circles. The place is moving." A chain clinked somewhere behind them, and this time they didn't ask which direction to run, because deep down they all knew there was nowhere left to go. The camera flickers back to life, its battery low, frame jittering with every step. She's alone now. The last one. Dirt and dried blood streak her face, eyes hollow with exhaustion and terror. Her breathing is shallow, but determined. She doesn't cry anymore. That part of her is gone. She's deep underground, deeper than the others ever dared to go. The stairwell she followed was hidden beneath a broken cot in the warden's office, sealed behind rotted boards and rusted nails, but something had pulled her toward it. A whisper she couldn't block out, a voice that wasn't hers, yet knew her name. The walls here are older, slick with moisture, pulsing faintly with an unnatural warmth. The deeper she moves, the colder the air becomes. The silence is suffocating. It isn't the kind of quiet you find in abandoned places. It's the silence of something listening, something waiting. At the end of the corridor stands a single door, not made of wood or iron, but of stone, carved with one phrase, endlessly etched into every surface, every corner, every crack. I am prisoner number 37. She pushes it open. Inside is not a cell, not exactly. It's a room of reflection, its walls lined with broken shards of mirrored glass, angled just enough to catch movement from every direction, and in the center, untouched, a single full-length mirror. Ancient, dustless. She raises her camera, pointing it at the mirror, recording herself. Nothing but her reflection, shaking, pale, alive. Then her breath catches. In the frame, just over her shoulder, something moves. A shape, tall, bound in heavy chains that drag soundlessly across the stone floor. Where its face should be, there's only a smooth expanse of flesh. No eyes, yet the sound begins. Not from its body, but from every mirror in the room. A whisper, slow and final. Now, you are prisoner 38. The camera drops, landing sideways on the floor. It continues to record. In the reflection, the faceless figure turns and walks past her. She does not scream. She simply stands frozen as her reflection fades and something else begins to take its place. The screen begins to flicker. The final moments of the recording sputter, choked by static, the footage distorted as if reality itself resists being shown. The dropped camera remains fixed on the cracked floor, tilted sideways, capturing only the echo of retreating footsteps, slow, deliberate, inhuman. Then silence, total, absolute black, a pause. Then white text fades in, one word at a time, like it's being typed by unseen hands. This footage was uploaded automatically. Another pause. The text lingers, then flickers out. Their bodies were never found. A burst of static cuts through the silence like a scream caught in a power line. The image returns for just a split second, frame after frame of corrupted footage, too fast to process. A face, a room, then gone. Darkness returns, and then the sound. At first it's distant, faint. You might mistake it for wind, or maybe the creak of old branches shifting in the cold night. But it grows, deliberate, heavier, metal on stone, metal on earth, chains, dragging, getting closer. The sound is no longer background noise. It moves forward, growing louder with every second, until it feels like it's just behind the screen, just behind you. The audio peaks, distorting, as if the microphone is struggling to capture the weight of it. Then, just beneath the clatter, another whisper, one that wasn't there before, so soft you almost miss it. One must always remain. Cut to black again, but this time it stays. No music, no credits, no end screen. Just the lingering feeling that something is still watching, still waiting, still recording. And in the silence, if you listen closely, too closely, you'll hear it. The chains never stop. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's ghost story. See you in the next, even more thrilling stories. If possible, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel to support me in creating more ghost stories for you. Thank you so much. Goodbye, and see you again.